Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
So this government's response to Beijing diplomats directly influencing and attempting to influence our elections is a stern conversation. What's becoming abundantly clear, Mr. Speaker, is the only thing they'll stand up for is Liberal Party interests. Right. Why wasn't a single diplomat from Beijing expelled after everything's been exposed? What are these guys hiding?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs has acted, and she's declined a visa to a foreign operative from a country like China. Mr. Speaker, we will always be there with eyes wide open to defend our democracy, to protect our sovereignty, and continue to stand up for Canadian values. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Lethbridge.
So what we see again and again and again and again is that this government will always put the Liberal Party of Canada first. The documents that were leaked by CSIS, the foremost intelligence agency in this country, showed that there was in fact political interference by Beijing and that it benefited the Liberal Party of Canada. In fact, it states that Beijing, wanted the Liberals to win. So, the Prime Minister is skirting around, won't give clear answers. Will he at least allow his Chief of Staff to come and publicly testify at committee so that Canadians can have the truth?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, when Justice O'Connor and Justice Iacobucci issued their reports calling upon the urgent need to have intelligent oversight that was involved with all parliamentarians so that all parliamentarians could see into every corner of government, the Leader of the Opposition did nothing. The Leader of the Opposition was the Minister for Democratic Reform and refused to act on those recommendations. And what we have done every step of the way is make sure that parliamentarians can see into every corner of government. But I would pose the question opposite. The member for St. Albert today said, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, I'll come back.
Member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, more than 1,000 Iranian schoolgirls from dozens of different schools have fallen gravely ill, and it's suspected they are being poisoned with biological warfare. As a mother of a young daughter, this is beyond horrific and horrifying. School-age girls have been instrumental in the women life freedom movement. Iranian lawyers, experts from the United Nations, and children's rights advocates are calling on governments around the world to support an independent investigation of these crimes. So will the government call for an independent investigation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, ever since the senseless killing of Mahsa Amini at the hands of the Iranian regime, the world has been horrified by the regime's violence, its own people, and their blatant disregard for human rights. We are aware of reports that Iranian schoolgirls are being poisoned, and we are following the situation with great concern. The truth of what happened to these young schoolgirls will come out. We will always stand with the women of Iran. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, the majority of care workers are women. They look after our loved ones in long-term care, in hospitals, and in child care centres. Yet these essential workers do not receive the respect they deserve. Many care workers still have precarious immigration status, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. They deserve status now. Will the Liberals finally grant permanent resident status to these migrant workers who are already contributing so much to society?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, you know, the world is in turmoil, and we should be very happy of our government and our efforts in protecting and supporting. My heart goes out, Mr. Speaker, to all the women and girls that are affected by a regime that we need to condemn, and we will continue. And Mr. Speaker, our government will always welcome our most vulnerable individuals. Bravo.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday was International Women's Day. Women's Day should be celebrated all the time. They have made and will continue to make incredible contributions to our economy and our country. Every woman counts is the theme this year. Let's celebrate all women who fought and continue to fight for their rights, all women that are thriving in everything they do. Can the Minister of International Trade, Export Promotion, Small Business and Economic Development update this House on what our government is doing to support Canadian women and especially women entrepreneurs for them to prosper and have a significant place in our economy?
The Minister for International Trade.
I want to thank the member for Scarborough Centre for all of her hard work. The Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy in Canada is working, Mr. Speaker. Since 2018, our government invested over $7 billion, and guess what? In Canada, women entrepreneurs, women-led businesses are growing. They're 18% now, and up from 16%, under 16%. And our ecosystem is helping Canadian entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs grow. Over 10,000 businesses, new businesses have started by women. Over 12,000 businesses have grown under the support of this government. So I want to thank all the incredible women entrepreneurs across the country for International Women's Day.
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, this week's housing data shows that the average rent across Canada has doubled. Average monthly mortgage costs have doubled. Variable mortgage holders are close to losing their homes. It's no surprise, after billions of taxpayer dollars spent, records in fact, that housing in this country is worse. It reminds me of the song we listened to growing up by Puff Daddy, more money, more problems. When will this Prime Minister end his more money, inflationary policies so that Canadians can finally afford a home?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
It's really interesting hearing members of that side talk about supports for Canadian renters. We've introduced the Canada Housing Benefit to help tens of thousands of Canadian renters across the country.
I'm going to have to interrupt the Honourable Minister. I'm having a hard time hearing his answer. It's nice to see everyone getting along and talking to each other, but it's getting a little bit loud, and it's making it hard for those who want to hear the response. The Honourable Minister from the top, please, so that we can all hear the response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is important to note that we've introduced supports for Canadian renters from the Canada Housing Benefit to the top-up, the $500 top-up that will go to almost 2 million Canadian renters. It is really interesting to hear rhetoric from the other side. Over the years, they've not only voted against our real supports for Canadian renters, they have no plan. They haven't produced any housing plan, any workable ideas. And I would urge the honourable member to take a look at our plan. It's a good plan. You should support it.
Well, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
On est fiers d'avoir voté contre.
We are proud of having voted against Liberal policies that doubled rents and doubled monthly mortgage payments. When the Liberals came to power, you could rent an apartment for $900, and now it's more than doubled to $2,000. At that time, you could pay for your mortgage with $1,400. Now that's more than $3,000. These inflationary deficits are increasing interest rates on mortgages. And the gatekeepers are keeping things that way. When will this government turn around these disastrous policies?
Speaker, what Canadians know is that they can't trust the Leader of the Opposition when it comes to protecting their savings, when it comes to protecting their bottom line. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition thought that to get out of inflation, you could just invest in cryptocurrency. Didn't go so well. You know what else he said, Mr. Speaker? He said that childcare was a slush fund for parents. Whoa. Mr. Speaker, I have traveled across this country and I have heard from parents from coast to coast to coast about how this is helping them at a time when there's a high cost of groceries, when rents are high, when they need to provide for their families. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, what they've learned is they can't trust the Leader of the Opposition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Well, here's what they know. When I was the minister responsible for housing, you could rent an apartment, an average apartment in the 10 biggest cities for $950 a month. Now, it's over $2,000 a month. When I was housing minister, it was $1,400 a month for the average mortgage. Now it's $3,200. And 1/5 of mortgage holders at CIBC are actually watching their mortgage grow as Liberal deficits push up interest rates on their monthly payments. They've done nothing to stand up to the gatekeepers that block housing construction. Will they get out of the way so homes can be built and we can bring home home ownership for our youth?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when that member was minister responsible for housing, there were 2.7 million more Canadians in poverty than there are today. Mr. Speaker, when that member was minister responsible for poverty reduction, there were 450,000 children more in poverty than there are today. And Mr. Speaker, when that minister was the minister responsible for democratic institutions, he made it harder for 150,000 Canadians to vote, Mr. Speaker. What we understand is we're moving forward, we're helping Canadians. He's only held them back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
When I was Minister for Housing, we didn't have students living in homeless shelters as we do right now. We didn't have 9 in 10 young people saying that they will never afford a home. In fact, you could buy the average home for $450,000, rent the average apartment for $950. It is now double. They've doubled house prices, doubled mortgage payments, and doubled the rent. Their inflationary deficits are driving up interest rates, and they've done nothing to get gatekeepers out of the way and get housing built. Will they reverse these disastrous housing policies so that we can bring home ownership for our youth?
Yes. The Honourable Minister of Housing.
We know that when the leader of the official opposition was in office, their government withdrew from social housing. They downloaded social housing to provinces and municipalities. We've brought measures to increase housing supply, to support municipalities and regional governments to build more housing. What did they do? They voted against that. And since he's become leader, he has offered no plan for housing. So I would really encourage, with all my sincerity, to have him look at our plan. We actually have a really good housing plan which delivers supports directly to people, directly to municipalities, directly to Indigenous communities, and has re-established...
The Honourable